For this past year, I have worked alongside amazing teams, the overall planning committee, the local organizing committee, and I can't say enough about an absolutely incredible AMS staff. I won't name them now. You've seen them rotating on some of the slides when you're sitting down, but we'll address them in the next business meeting coming up after this one. In this meeting and planning for the meeting, we tried new things. We have the presidential conference that starts with this forum, and then we have 14 individual presidential sessions. The last session each morning, we have either 3 or 4 presidential sessions. And I'm sure that each one of you, if this isn't your first meeting, you talk to your colleagues and your friends, and everyone's always complaining, I can't decide where to go. There are too many to choose from. So we simplified it this year in that on Tuesday and Thursday, we have sort of quasi-plenary sessions. We have 4 presidential sessions in that last session on Tuesday morning and Thursday morning where there are no other competing sessions. So you will just have a choice of 4. That's not bad. And I want to thank the, I talked about the teams, the planning committees, but all the specialty conferences here, why many of you are here is to participate, present in one of the specialty conferences. We needed a team effort across all the specialty conferences and our planning committee so that we could carve out that time. Take advantage of it. We had these, the topics range from foundational science. How do we combat mis and disinformation? What about attribution? We hear so much about attribution. Climate services and policy, and yes, indeed, discussions about real solutions. So we offer that through this whole entire week, Monday through Thursday, that last session, pay attention to the presidential conference. We also revamped some old things, the awards ceremony. It had kind of gradually migrated to Sunday. To me, through my career, I enjoyed the banquet. I know I'm a minority there, but I always enjoyed going to the banquet. Okay, a few of us, older ones in the crowd, but it wasn't the rubber chicken why I enjoyed it, but it was sitting there and going through the awards presentations and getting to sit back and listen to the giants in our field, to go up there and share their life story, how they saw that in their perspective. And it meant so much to me. And with it on Sunday, we just weren't getting the turnouts. And so what we've done is we've brought the spotlight back on awards. We've put it on Wednesday. We're not going to have a banquet. Don't get too nervous. We still have our party, our Wednesday night live event, but early evening, what time, 6? 6 o'clock, we're going to have it here, I think. And we're going to have a pre-award ceremony reception. And just in case you're still kind of on the fence, we're going to have champagne and cheese. So make sure, yes, make sure you show up, honor our colleagues, learn from our colleagues. It's so critical to our community. So highlight Wednesday night. I want to see everyone here enjoying the champagne, toasting our heroes in the field. So enjoy this week. Take advantage of both our conference, the presidential conference, but all the specialty conferences. Have fun. Meet your colleagues, meet new colleagues, consider new careers. It's just incredible what we offer as a community and a discipline. So we have much to be proud of as the weather, water, and climate enterprise, yet we have so much more to do. Let's start this week. So I now want to move on to a welcome that we have from Maryland's Governor Wes Moore.
Good afternoon. It's Governor Wes Moore, and I want to take a moment to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you gathered at the Baltimore Convention Center for the annual meeting of the American Meteorological Society. It is a joy to have you here in our beautiful state. As you convene to discuss the latest advancements in your field, I believe it is absolutely crucial to acknowledge the profound impact that climate science has on our lives every single day. Because here in Maryland, we're acutely aware of the challenges posed by climate change. That's why our commitment to building a resilient future is unwavering. I'm proud to lead the charge through our Climate Resiliency Office, which works to prepare our state for the changing climate that impacts each and every one of us. Your work is at the forefront of our efforts to understand and mitigate the impacts of climate change. It also plays a pivotal role in helping us to build resilient communities. The data, insights, and innovations generated by your research empower policymakers like myself to make informed decisions that help protect people while also safeguarding our entire environment. Climate resilience isn't just a goal, it is a shared responsibility that requires collaboration across disciplines and also across borders. So as you engage in your meaningful discussions over the next few days, I encourage you to share your expertise, exchange ideas, and foster collaborations to drive progress in climate science. Thank you. Thank you for being champions in the fight against climate change, and let's work together to create a world that isn't just sustainable and resilient, but one that thrives in the face of the challenges that lie ahead.
It's shocking to me that I wrote his and I wrote mine, and look at the difference. What an orator, really, yeah. So, moving right along, it is now my honor to introduce my colleague and friend, Kerry Emanuel, to the stage as moderator for the rest of the session. Kerry is Professor Emeritus at MIT. He retired from teaching in 2022, but is still active in research on convection, tropical weather, and climate. Kerry.
Brad, I think your oration is just terrific. And Wes Moore, too. Wonderful to be here with all of you today. I'm glad to see you here in the audience. You chose us over a football game. That's the first promising sign. But I think you won't be disappointed because we've been very successful in getting two brilliant speakers to have a conversation about climate with us today. And the first that I'll introduce is my friend and in a way colleague, Bob Inglis. Bob is the executive director of Republican.org, an organization dedicated to advancing conservative approaches to dealing with climate change. He was the U.S. representative for South Carolina's 4th Congressional District from 1993 to 1999, and again from 2005 to 2011, but lost re-election in significant part because of his stance in favor of dealing with climate change. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Kerry. Wow, I once played a meteorologist on television. It was one morning on WYFF TV in Greenville, South Carolina, and I didn't get invited back because I got up and I was trying to work that green screen thing, and it just wasn't working for me. Whereupon the real one came out who, poor sucker, apparently they thought he looked like me, and he then continued and did the regular weathercast. So I'm not a meteorologist, and you may wonder why I'm here. I'm here because I think that you can help us reach the indispensable partners in the indispensable nation for climate change, American conservatives. And so you'd be thinking about that. Really, English? You think I can help you? I think you can. But I'll get to that after I explain how I got to this, because that seems to require some explanation. English, this is a liberal cause, man. How could you be a conservative so hepped up on climate? Well, that's the way I thought my first 6 years in Congress. Al Gore's for it, I'm against it. Next question. Okay, pretty ignorant, but that's the way it was my first 6 years in Congress. I represented Greenville-Spartanburg, South Carolina, probably the reddest district in the reddest state of the nation. Anybody want to fight me for that distinction? There might be somebody here from Idaho 2, no, Idaho 1, and they might be able to take that from me. Okay, so I fit the district for those first 6 years. Then I was out of Congress for 6 years doing commercial real estate law. Had the opportunity to run for the same seat again in 2004. That's the year that our son, the eldest of our 5 kids, had just turned 18. So he was voting for the first time. And he came to me and said, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." His 4 sisters agreed, his mother agreed. New constituency. You know, those people can change the locks on the doors to your house. Very important to respond to those people. So step 1 of a 3-step metamorphosis. By the way, my son was going to vote for me no matter what, right? He knew we could lose by 1 vote. It wasn't in his economic interest to vote against me. You know, he was a freshman in college. He was going to vote for me no matter what. I think what he's really saying was, "Dad, I love you, and you can be better than you were before. So how about make this English 2.0, the new and improved version?" So that's step 1. Step 2 is going to Antarctica with a science committee and seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Maybe some people here that have worked on those ice core drillings. Step 3 was another science committee trip and something of a spiritual awakening, which seems improbable, doesn't it, on a godless science committee trip? Because we all know that all scientists are godless. Apparently not, because this Aussie climate scientist who I was snorkeling with was clearly worshiping God in what he was showing me at the Great Barrier Reef. We'd go down, 2 of us snorkeling together. He'd point at something. He'd come to the surface. I'd be gasping for air. He has amazing lung capacity, and he would then explain to me what he just showed me with great excitement. So I knew that it was an act of worship for him to be showing me all those things. And so, you know, St. Francis of Assisi supposedly said, I don't know if he actually said it, but supposedly St. Francis of Assisi said, "Preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words." And so Scott Heron, that Aussie climate scientist who's now become a very dear friend, was preaching the gospel. I knew we shared a worldview before any words were spoken. Later, though, we had a chance to talk without the snorkels in our mouths. And he told me about conservation changes he was making in his life to love God and love people. Scott rides his bike to work, does without air conditioning as much as possible in Townsville, Australia, a pretty hot place, hangs the family's clothes out on the line, all to consciously love people coming after us. I got right inspired. I want to be like Scott. So I loving God and loving people. So I came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. Note to self, do not introduce carbon tax in midst of Great Recession when you represent perhaps the reddest district of the reddest state of the nation. It will not go well. And it did not go well at all. After 12 years in Congress, I got 29% of the vote in the Republican runoff that year. The other guy got the other 71%. You know, you usually don't do that badly unless you've been indicted or something. Actually, that used to be the case. Now you get indicted, maybe you know, your stock goes up. But anyway, I hadn't been indicted on anything. I had just gotten on the wrong side of Tea Party orthodoxy, on the most enduring heresy being climate change. Because at that point, my party became the party that said, listen, we don't need to worry about that one. Take that worry bead off the strand. And so at that point, you know, a foundation came to me and said, you know, Inglis, unusual zoo animal you are. Actual conservative, you know, 93 American Conservative Union rating, 100% Christian Coalition, 100% National Right to Life, A with the NRA, 0 with the Americans for Democratic Action, that's a liberal group, 23 by some mistake with the AFL-CIO, the labor union. I was really gunning for a 0. I don't know how to get a 23. They said actual conservative. who says climate change is real. Will you speak and write for the proposition? So that's what I've been doing ever since. There's now this thing called republicen.org, EN for Energy, Entrepreneurship, the Environment. We're after those conservatives. So that's how I got to this. The thing I'd like to say to you, though, is you can be crucial in helping us reach them. And you may be saying, Inglis, I don't live in a conservative place. I don't have any conservative friends. I don't know conservative people. Maybe you're from, say, I don't know, the Bay Area or Boston, Massachusetts. You know, not exactly many conservatives hanging in those places. But the opposite end of the spectrum probably exists here too, and that is somebody maybe in Oklahoma or Tennessee or South Carolina, where you interact with politicians or you're a state agency or perhaps have to interact with those people, and you have to sort of tone it down about climate. Either way, you can help us reach these folks. If you yourself are a progressive, here's what I'd say to you. The best thing you can do to help us is just say to your Uncle Charlie, the guy who watches a lot of Fox, the guy who disputes climate change and dismisses your whole endeavor of your whole life, just say to him, be vulnerable enough to say to Charlie, Charlie, we need you. This isn't going to happen without you. Will you help us? Because if you do that, Charlie's heart might just melt, and you might be able to reach Charlie. So even if you're a progressive dealing with Uncle Charlie, you can help us. And of course, if you're a conservative, you can help us by helping them to hear it in their own language. They don't want to hear it in the language of communitarian egalitarianism. That's what progressives speak. They believe in community, they focus on fairness. They want to hear it in the language of hierarchical individualism, which is the language of conservatism. So if you're a conservative, put it in those terms. Help them figure out what you can do in the war, Daddy, because that hierarchical individualist needs to have an answer to that question. What'd you do in the war, Daddy, about climate change? And so you can speak to them that way. But across that spectrum, meteorologists, especially those on air, have the opportunity to reach. And of course, I realize there's a lot of risk in that reach. But I've sort of experienced that risk and know what it's like. But I got to tell you, it's worth it. You know, I was telling Kerry earlier, I happen to believe that if you're in Congress, and this applies if you're on air as a meteorologist, if you're not willing to lose your job, why have the job? You know, if you're a member of Congress and you're not willing to lose your job, there's really very little reason to be there, is there? The whole idea is to lead. And if all you do is follow people where they're already going, what good are you? You may as well lead and go out in a blaze of glory. Now, of course, if you're a meteorologist, hopefully that's not going to happen to you if you're on air. But there are ways that you can help reach the audience so they can understand it's real, and maybe we can avoid the worst of it. So I'm very happy to be here with you so that we can figure out how to do this to reach that indispensable partners in the indispensable nation. And by the way, one apology. You notice we had the colors up there earlier, and it's all red, and it's all this conservative stuff, and it's all in that language of hierarchical individualism. And we may be doing it all wrong, because some people tell me, English, you're just dividing the country. Why were you talking about Republic EN? Shouldn't you be talking about us as Americans? Well, our theory of the case is speak in their language, let them hear it and embrace it, and then they can engage in the topic. That's our hope. That's our plan. And you know, here's the thing. The solution that we talk about a lot, a revenue-neutral, border-adjustable carbon tax, is the same thing that Al Gore has been for about 30 years. I asked him several years ago if I could keep on saying that. He said, hold up, Bob. If you're talking a low, I said, no, sir, I'm talking a substantial carbon tax that's steadily rising and that's applied at the borders in favor of a cut in payroll taxes. He said, fine then. You can tell people that what you're for at republicen.org is the same thing I've been for about 30 years. Our hope, therefore, after speaking to conservatives in their own language, is to actually bring the country together and have it lead the world to solutions on climate change. And that's why I'm happy to be here with people who can help us do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks very much, Bob. That's great. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Monica Medina, who has been since June of last year the president and CEO of Wildlife Conservation Society, advancing conservation science and environmental policy. Prior to joining WCS, she served the Assistant Secretary for Oceans and International Environment and Scientific Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, and from 2009 to 2012 was NOAA's Principal Deputy Undersecretary. Monica.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you. And I came in my blue, which I guess means I'm the blue side of the equation here, but hopefully we'll find a lot of common ground in this conversation. I believe we will. Thank you, Kerry, for that introduction. Thank you, Brad, for making this happen. This couldn't be a more important conversation, as you said, and it couldn't come at a more important time. I, too, have a sort of a hankering for weather and climate and all things that you all do out there. I spent a lot of time in NOAA, actually, both in the Clinton administration and then in the Obama administration. So I have a tremendous respect for what you all do and how you go out and do it every single day, delivering a product that matters, that helps people in this country do better, live better, have an easier time dealing with the weather and climate every single day. So I just want to say from the public's perspective, thank you for what you do, and thank you for going out there a little bit on this limb, because I know it's not your comfort zone naturally. You know, you're used to talking about numbers and data and, you know, very specific forecasts and things, and climate is a little bit of a challenge, I think, for people to understand for many of the reasons that Bob explained. And at the Wildlife Conservation Society, we're not that far off from what you all are doing, because we have in New York the 4 big zoos, the Bronx Zoo, the Central Park Zoo, the Queens Zoo, and the Prospect Park Zoo, and the New York Aquarium that we run, where we do the same thing. We try to translate this big, thorny, hard to understand climate problem that people can kind of see parts of, but it's hard to grasp the size of it and what to do about it. So we have the same challenge, which is how do you educate people? How do you help them to understand and find ways that they can find agency and do things so that it doesn't feel so helpless? And I'll say, I spent last week I spent a little time last week with Al Gore, and he's still, and so are many CEOs of big multinational corporations talking about climate, carbon and border adjustment taxes. But I think to the average person, that's a really hard thing to understand. What they do understand is their insurance is going up, their house maybe their basement is flooded out, or they don't have drinking water because their wells are running dry. And that's where I think, again, you all can help them so much. Now, because we don't have the same language, I guess, on the more liberal side of the world, we don't think in terms of sort of how to use particular words, but we have tried to analyze who are the audiences out there that we're trying to reach. And there are 6 distinct audiences, according to climate researchers and social scientists, who've tried to break down this question of how do you appeal to people about climate. There's the alarmed, and that's about 28% of the people, and they're convinced, they're already there. There's concerned, and that's a big slug of people. It's 29% of the public, and they tend to believe that climate is sort of far off and not in time and in space. It's not really near them. And so it's sort of an issue, but not really that immediate. But they're concerned. They are concerned, and they're growing more concerned. Then there are people who are cautious. They haven't quite made up their mind. That's about 15% of the public, and they certainly don't know whether humans are to blame for this, and they're not sure how serious it is. There's a group of people, 6%, who are completely disengaged. They're not paying attention. They're busy worrying about their day-to-day, and they never hear about the topic. But then there are two other groups that are really interesting. There's the doubtful, and that's 11%, and they don't know, and they think it's all naturally happening. And there's a lot of tropes out there. There's a lot of messaging out there that plays to this, that sort of tells people, oh, this is what would have happened anyway. That's what a lot of people who, on the conservative side, who don't believe in climate change, that's one set of arguments that they use all the time. And then there are the dismissive, who just think it's a big hoax. And, well, we know who that really is, who's really propagating that theory out there. And, gosh, it's a shame, because you all know it's not a hoax. And that's a hard thing to fight in this world of disinformation and disaggregation. So what I would say, from my experience, is that one thing that really works is talking about how it impacts people, telling stories. And all of this data and this these set of 6 types of people who listen to climate change come from 2 universities, again, red and blue, if you will, Yale here in the Northeast, and George Mason University, which teamed up to create a whole center on climate communications for just this purpose. They do polling, they do lots of work on how to break through some of these barriers. And they believe that it's really important to communicate that climate change is happening now, that it's real. It's not some figment of people's imagination. It's not a hoax. It's not natural. It's happening now. And there are things that people can do about it. And it doesn't have to even be as extreme as not putting your clothes in a dryer, or only riding a bike, or never eating a hamburger again. There are things that we all can do. And I think that's a way that, again, you all can reach people by helping them to feel like there are things they can do. I know that after the 2000 election, people have seen climate change as increasingly a political issue. It hurts me to the core to think that green has become a dirty word, that green is seen as somehow anti-people, anti-individual, anti-business, when waste is bad and pollution that hurts people and harms their health is bad. I think most people agree on that. So that's one thing that I wish we could break away from. I think, Bob, you hinted at this or talked directly about it, and I want to second it. I think what the research and what we all on the liberal side know is that talking about climate change with your family, with the people who are doubtful or dismissive or even cautious, is a really good way to actually help people to see that this is real and it's happening now and we can do things about it. You all are in their homes every day, or your products are, and what you do and the way you communicate this whole issue really matters. And I do agree with you, Bob, on sometimes the way that the liberals or scientists talk about it. 1.5 degrees, how bad does that sound? Not very bad, right? Like, how hard is it to get worried about 1.5 degrees when you got to pay your bills or get your kid to school on time or whatever it is? 1.5 degrees and greenhouse gases don't sound as bad, but we know that people are experiencing extreme weather events. And when that's explained to them, that there's a link between climate change and what they're feeling in their day-to-day lives, it changes people's minds. And more people do really know something's different about the weather. And its causes are not discussed, but the weather is changing. Just ask somebody who gardens. They know that their plants are blooming at different times. For goodness sakes, we've seen cherry blossoms in this region blooming now It's so strange. They were blooming in November, and then they went dormant, and they're blooming again because of the weird, cycles of weather, extreme weather. And I will tell you, from my perspective, even as a person who runs zoos, we have a zoo in New York that has been closed since September because of a severe rainstorm event that many of you probably helped us predict, in which we got so flooded in the basement of our Prospect Park Zoo that we are still closed 4 months later, and probably will be for very many more months. Hopefully by the summer we'll be able to get it opened again. But we're really struggling in a day-to-day way with these impacts. And if there's one thing I could leave you with, it is that, in my time at NOAA, what I experienced was the weather community and the climate community, even within NOAA, felt like they were two different parts of the organization. And I would say that the climate community and the weather community could do a great service thinking about climate services and the same kinds of forecasts and predictions that we have gotten so accustomed to relying on the weather side. We need to be building up that capacity on the climate side and building the connective tissue, the connective stories, the connective communications to make sure that people understand that we in the community who are trying to deal with the climate crisis are trying to make their lives better. That this isn't just about, trying to make their lives worse, for goodness sakes. This is about trying to help them be prepared, help them have the tools they need, help them just the way, you bring an umbrella, but think about how to waterproof your basement or make sure that you have another source of water if your well is running dry or whatever it is. The goal here is to help people not be the victims of climate, not be the ones who are stressed by climate, not have their lives be harder because of climate, not have their food prices higher because of climate, because we haven't adapted seeds or our agriculture practices, or any number of ways in which we know that we have to change and adapt to climate. I want to take a minute to actually recognize a few people who I've worked with in the weather community. Stephanie Abrams and Jordan Steele have a show on the Weather Channel called Patterns, and they have me on often. And I really commend them for actually doing the hard work of talking about this issue every day with people like me. And then there are meteorologists like Amelia Draper at NBC4 in DC who has a daily segment on climate every day, 5 minutes, where she talks about how it impacts people's lives. I guess I'll stop there and just say, we think about climate change in my world as a global problem, and it's so big, but really what you all do is bring it down to the neighborhood level, the kind of individual level. And what you can do is continue to go out there on that limb. I know it's probably uncomfortable. I know it's hard, but there are so many ways in which climate is already impacting people's lives, whether it's their insurance rates going up or their inability to build a new home in a place like Arizona because you can't get water to that home. We see the impacts every day. It's connecting those dots that's hard. I think if you keep that in mind, that what you're doing is trying to help them make the decisions that they need to make in order to keep themselves safe, keep their loved ones safe, protect their property. For goodness sakes, that is the whole of the enterprise. That's why we're here. So I would just say the time is now, there is no time to waste, and you can all be part of the solution. So I hope that you will take on this challenge, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the conversation as well, and I'm sure it will be good. I feel that I ought to announce that it is a complete accident that that side of the room is illuminated with blue and that side red, all right? Nobody thought of that. But that brings me to, I think, what both of you touched on. We live, like it or not, and I certainly don't like it, in a highly polarized time. Climate policy really naturally should be and was at one time a strongly bipartisan issue, but like many other things it shouldn't have been, it's become very polarized. Given the circumstance, how do you think climate professionals, and this room is filled with weather and climate professionals, can help you guys do your job, and more generally than that, help policymakers deal with climate change? We'll start with you, Bob.
Well, I said earlier, whether you're on the left or right, you can help us at republican.org. Another way I think you can help is just, there's this, I think it's a Swedish saying, no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
Yes.
Sort of another way of putting that, no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. We need sort of that kind of projection of a message, seems to me, on climate. And so perhaps even in a place like I was postulating that maybe Oklahoma or Tennessee or South Carolina, maybe if you're an on-air personality, it might be a little bit hard to talk about climate. But if you can, even in those places, say, climate change is here, maybe we can avoid the worst of it. And gives people sort of a sense of hope that you're being true to the science, that it's real, climate change is here, but then you're adding an element of maybe we can avoid the worst of it. And of course, you're not necessarily in your profession on the policy side of that, but just anything that you can do to give people the sense of efficacy over the problem is a huge help. Because what happens way too often, in fact, really happens to people right of center, is actually they've heard plenty about the problem of climate change. Maybe even a little bit too much. They want to hear a little bit about solutions. Because if you can give me some hope that I could get out of this mess I'm in, then maybe I could engage. But if you're going to tell me the apocalypse is upon me, we're all dying next Tuesday, well, eat, drink, and be merry. But if you can tell me just climate change is here, maybe we can avoid the worst of it, or something better than that that fits with no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear.
Great. Monica.
So I think that's great advice. And I think I'll turn the question around and say, I hope that in my current job and at the Wildlife Conservation Society and other environmental organizations, what we can do is help you all figure out how to explain it to people in ways that they will relate to. And I'll think, you talked about individualism, and I'll talk about another way I think that appeals to everyone in the world, which is nature. And the way that the world and nature is being impacted by climate change. If you talk about that, and people want to save nature for the most part, they really appreciate the natural world. They understand, and if you can help explain to them why natural systems really matter, why it's important to have mangroves on a coast to sop up all that storm surge and be like that sponge. Again, connect the dots on some of the natural earth sciences and tap into people's love of animals and nature. One of the things I think that's most effective is thinking about, how it impacts the things that people love. The corals that are bleaching, right? Like you, yeah. And thinking about how morally, in a way, not that it's, not trying to say anyone's immoral, but just thinking about the morality of saving the planet and the importance of our home, I do think relates to people. People want to be able to fish and swim in the ocean and go on a walk in a place where it's not denuded, where the soil isn't blowing away. And so I think the natural world regenerates. Trees are one of the best carbon sinks out there. They're effective and cheap. So, and there's things everybody can do, whether it's planting a tree or finding ways to have less food waste. There's a whole lot of ways that you all can help connect dots.
Great, thank you. So we've been talking about how to communicate and whether even to communicate how much climate information. There's another problem, And many of you out there asked this question through the device here, but I was going to ask it anyway. There's also the negative side of that, which is disinformation about climate. And of course, disinformation is a big problem across a whole suite of problems we have. How would you deal with that? How important do you think it is to deal with that? And we'll go the other way around, start with Monica.
Well, I think it's very important for the trusted partners in this room, whether you're a meteorologist on air or a scientist trying to convey your latest research. It is so important to speak up and to say that it's real and it's happening now, and to counter that disinformation. People's lives depend on it, and we can think of some examples where there have been people who gave false narratives, and it could have been really disastrous if people didn't know which way that hurricane was actually going. So I think it couldn't be more important. That's the essence of what you all are doing the work for, which is to help people. And so it's more important than ever to speak up, and I know how courageous some in the government have been speaking up when they felt like they couldn't. And I encourage you to keep it up and just know that you're doing something really important and helping people's lives be better and future generations' lives be better.
It's certainly vital to confront the disinformation, and so that's something, as Monica just said, particularly from trusted folks. That could be the on-air people, it could be the scientists, and even if you are the Bay Area scientist visiting with a cousin or uncle in Tennessee, as long as you just approach it with humility and not try to claim that you're a conservative while you're in Tennessee, but rather say, no, I'm here because we need you, you can actually break through. So you could just use that kind of vulnerability to create trust even in the instant that you're there. But other people have a built-in community that you can reach. And so for those folks, you are a trusted messenger for confronting the disinformation. But I could also give you this hope. I think it used to be the case that it was really all about the science and the disinformation. In fact, when I was getting tossed out of Congress in 2010, it was aggressive disbelief. I believe in climate change, you shouldn't either, is basically the way it was. Now it's quite different. People have stopped arguing with thermometers so much. We had my co-founder at Republican.org is a little bit of a smart aleck. And he was in Miami one time speaking to some young Republicans, and some gal in the audience said she didn't believe in sea level rise. And Alex Bosmosky, my co-founder, says, "What? You don't believe in rulers, yardsticks? What are you talking?" I probably would handle the question a little bit differently, but the idea is that was really early on in this. Now it's more people not arguing with thermometers, not arguing with yardsticks and rulers about sea level rise. The main mental block that we find right of center is, yeah, but how you get the world in on this thing? That's the mental block now. Because they've come to understand that there must be some people selling some disinformation out there. And they just want to know, though, how you get the world in on it. They're suspicious of a regulatory solution because they realize you can't regulate Chinese emissions from here in America. They're a little bit suspicious of the clean energy incentives because they know they're going to expire at some point. And they don't affect foreign firms because you're not affecting their economics through American tax credits. And so they're looking for a way to get the world in on it. And as proof of that, I would point out that there are actually some Republican initiatives to deal with this through a trade lens. The Prove It Act, which passed 14-5 last week in the Senate Environment Committee. The Senator Cassidy's bill to have a foreign pollution fee. These are sort of ways of dealing with that trade aspect. And so there's another avenue in that may be through the mental block, is what I'm suggesting to you.
Thank you. So among the many professionals in the room today are a certain number of broadcast meteorologists, and amongst all of us, many of us are squirreling away in our labs with very little direct contact with large segments of the public, but in some ways, broadcast meteorologists are our window to the world. So I wanted to ask you both, how important do you think it is for broadcast meteorologists to convey messages about climate, for example, by putting, let's say, extreme weather events in the context of climate change, or not?
I think it's vital, and we actually have some good results on this. Monica mentioned the work of the Center for Climate Change Communication, Yale partnering with George Mason. We're actually at George Mason, at that center, Ed Maybach Center, and Ed organizes this Weathercasters project, and it's really having good results because you are the trusted messenger. They actually trust you. If you're an on-air meteorologist, they trust you to figure out whether to take the umbrella, or whatever, or send the kids with the galoshes. And so really, it's a prized position and an opportunity for you to speak to that. And can I also say this too? Kerry and I were talking about this earlier. It's also helpful when you say it's not climate change. And so when we, at republican.org, we really played up that atmospheric river with a number of quotes from atmospheric scientists saying, it's not climate change. It's just a natural thing. Because it really helped, we think, in our community for people to say, oh, that's credible science. In other words, they're telling us straight. Some things are climate change and should be put in context. Other things, like you explained to me, Kerry, can't clearly be associated with climate change. And so therefore, when you say that, you build credibility for the entire field that way. Because sometimes it becomes a little bit of a laugh line about how it must be climate change. My hot tea just got cold, must be climate change. So it's helpful to be both, put it in context and also contextualize the non-climate things.
Great. Monica?
I can't emphasize enough, as another one of those trusted partners, how important it is for the broadcast meteorologists to talk about this. And I actually think social media, at NOAA, we started tweeting about extreme weather events and now, and a lot about climate, actually. And now I see meteorologists doing that, because that's another way that you reach people, is through social media. So I would say yes, and don't just think about your daily broadcast time, but think about all the other ways that you reach people, and again, telling those stories, bringing it down to where they are. Should they plant their bulbs now? Should it be, and how is that being affected by the fact that the seasons might be shifting a little bit? Or, if you're a worker outside, today's a day to really worry about that heat and ask your boss if you can get a break because it's a code red day. Or I'll tell you another one. For the first time, we had to close our zoos last summer because of the smoke from Canada, that all the way in New York, and the air quality index was through the roof. Boy, was that a teachable moment, and weather forecasters all over the Northeast had to deal with that in a way that the West Coast were going, yep, see?
Tell us about it. Okay, so I'm going to ask each of you a question individually, just for you. So I'll start with you, Monica. So you represent a really important effort to improve the welfare of wildlife. And many of us here tonight, if I'm an example, might not have thought much about how climate change might affect wildlife, except for perhaps polar bears. Can you share with us some of your chief concerns about how climate change might affect wildlife?
Absolutely. What we see is the difficulty that wildlife that can't migrate so quickly or easily, their habitats are disappearing because of climate change. We're losing forest areas at a football field second, if you can imagine. Now, not all of it is climate related. Some of it is because people are cutting them down too, but often they're burning. And what happens to the wildlife in those areas is really tragic as well. We know that fisheries will shift significantly. I know, Kerry, we were talking about how the fisheries in the lobster fishery in New England is moving farther and farther north because the ocean in the Atlantic, is warming so considerably. So I think it is a way into explaining climate to people, and it doesn't have to be the polar bear, the really thin polar bear on an ice on an ice floe. There are lots of ways in which we know that wildlife is being impacted, whether it's zoonotic or other diseases that are spread because mosquitoes come farther north, or whether it's because the fisheries will change significantly and we can't feed people as easily, or whether it's because habitat is just completely disappearing, like coral reefs are going to be gone potentially in the next decades if we don't turn things around. And I think that does appeal to people at some very sort of basic human level.
Thank you. So this question is for you, Bob. It comes from the audience. Are there 2 or 3 quick messages that resonate with conservatives to help them understand and accept the realities and impacts of warming climate?
I'm not sure about messages about impacts, but I am pretty sure that if you talk to them about solutions is where the needle moves mostly, because I think that's where the trouble is. Like I say, the current mental block is about how do you get the world in on this thing, and if you can. So what I like to do is I like to go in and say, what if I could show you a solution that gets the world in on this? What if it's just as simple as changing what we tax? And what if America happens to be really good at innovation? That sort of sets up a very different conversation than, really you're under great risk. They've heard a lot about that. And again, I'm just understand I'm talking center right, or right of center. That's who I'm talking to. And I would assume that it works quite well left of center to talk in communitarian, egalitarian language. It's about the community, it's about fairness, it's about those things. But if you're talking right of center, I think Dan Kahan has it right at Yale. You need to be talking hierarchical individualism. These are people who believe in hierarchies, work through a chain of command, and they really value individual effort. So to give you an example, concrete example of that, Robbie Kenner did the film Merchants of Doubt, and he sent me sort of a rough cut of it. And it wasn't like I could really ask him to do something, but I said, hey, Robbie, that last scene when you have Jim Henson being arrested at the White House fence for chaining himself to the fence, could you just sort of take that out? And he didn't take it out. If you've seen Merchants of Doubt, Jim's in there being hauled off into the paddy wagon. But you see, that's not hierarchical, individualistic gear. It's not geared to a hierarchical individualist, because conservatives don't chain themselves to the White House fence. They just don't do that. Rather, they go to county council and rail about the UN's Agenda 21. Okay, anybody know about that? In other words, it has nothing to do with the county council, but they see that that's what they're doing. They're working through a chain of command. And so it's mostly, if you're going to crack the code, I think it's mostly, Kerry, about solutions if you're talking right of center, not so much about impacts. Because I think they've heard a lot about impacts. And they're starting to experience them. That's what I'm telling you about. People stopped arguing with thermometers a while back. You still have some people doing that, but we're never going to get them all. We just need enough right of center to join with left of center folks in getting this done.
I'll just interject here that in my own talks on climate, I find one statement works very well, which sounds almost Machiavellian, but I actually believe it was where there's risk, there's opportunity.
Yeah.
An opportunity to make the world a better place.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go back to a question for both of you from the audience. The elephant in the room is how special interest groups can easily influence politicians. Do you think this needs to be addressed? And I guess we'll start with you, Bob.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned special interest groups, particularly campaign cash. Yeah, I can't be so crass as to say campaign cash. I think it's part of the explanation, it's not the whole explanation. If it were the whole explanation, Nikki Haley would be winning in South Carolina right now. Because Americans for Prosperity, the Koch brothers, the people who destroyed me in 2010, have sent my wife and I at least 15 or 20 postcards trashing Donald Trump and supporting Nikki Haley. But I'm here to predict that it probably won't work out that way. In other words, the campaign cash that AFP is spending is probably not going to be determinative or dispositive in South Carolina. So it's a factor, it's not the only factor though. The key factor is just sort of a deeper sort of cultural kind of sense. And this is the thing that's really hard to overcome. Because somehow climate has been pushed into the woke basket. And so what we at republican.org are constantly trying to do is jump out of that basket. Because if it's in that cultural context, we're toast. If it's in the cultural context of American solutions and innovation is going to drive this thing, and we are going to win at it, then you can see that it works right of center. So I think it's campaign cash and interest groups like AFP do have play an outsized role, but it's something beyond that. It's this deeper sort of sense of cultural awareness that we got to deal with.
So I'm going to go at this from a slightly different perspective, which is to try to take politics out of it altogether, which is really, I think, what you all are trained to do, which is to stick to the science and really tell people the truth. And I just believe, maybe that's, I'm not jaded enough, but I just believe that people will see the truth if we keep telling them, and not politicizing it at all, not being influenced by the influencers who are trying to knock you out of your game. What gives you strength is that you come from a position of facts and information and the best science that collectively you can put together to try to help people. And if you come at it, trying to explain to people that that you're giving them this forecast, you're telling them these warnings, you're trying to help them get ahead of something that may really matter to them either today or a month or, a year from now. But coming at it with trying to keep the politics from getting in your heads and just sticking with doing your jobs the way you've always done it and continuing to follow that path that is the one that is what you're supposed to be doing. Maybe that's naive, but I do think that your credibility comes from this place of strength, which is that it's grounded, the work you're doing is grounded in this collective weather and climate enterprise that is doing good things and always trying to get better. And so just stick to that.
I'm going to ask a sort of a follow-up question to both of you, but stemming from the point you just made, Monica, which is that there are many people in this room who go about their jobs every day with research and things, and in my experience in the research community, politics almost never, and perhaps literally never entered. We didn't talk about politics in the context of the work we were doing. Nothing political inherently about that work. But what I worry about is that in contrast to most of the broadcast meteorologists here, we weren't trained, most of us, to communicate our research in an environment that is polarized. Of course, we do have to communicate our research to the public anyway, even if it has nothing to do with politics. But I think I felt the fear, and I suspect many in this room have, that in doing that, we inadvertently convey some kind of political slant by our choice of words unconsciously. Maybe it's real politics entering, and maybe it's just we've never been trained really to deal with that. How do you see that playing out? Do you think climate scientists doing research should maybe talk to social scientists or professionals about how to better communicate what we're doing? I guess we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Bob.
Okay, well, I think absolutely, that it's all, I mean, whether it's fishery science or climate science or any of the sort of really hard sciences, social sciences are a way to help explain whatever it is to people. And that's why I love this Yale George Mason effort at climate communications. I think it couldn't be more valuable. But I also think some of it is just trying to break it down a little bit and think about it not as a scientist, but as the person listening on the other end of your conversation. How will they understand it? Things like heat waves in the ocean really help to explain these phenomenon in ways that people can understand.
Yeah, I think it's, it is very helpful to have the social science inform the communication of the hard science. It's also true that some of it you learned in kindergarten, and you just have to remember what you learned in kindergarten. And that is that we learn from people who like us, and especially from people who are like us. And if you tell me you don't like me, I don't want to hear much else you got to say. It's like I was once at this conference, and a guy says to me, "Did you buy carbon offsets for your travel here?" And I said, "No, that's a scam, isn't it? Because I just read something in the Wall Street Journal, this is like 5 or 7 years ago, where it was really, it's still a little bit iffy, but it was way iffy back then." He turned to the guy next to him and says, "That's what they all say when they don't want to be responsible." If that guy told me today's Sunday, I'd check my calendar, right? I don't want to hear any more the guy's got to say, because he's just told me he's a saint, I'm a sinner. He's in, I'm out. I don't want to hear any more from him, right? And so somehow, when you're communicating your science, you have to just step into the shoes of the person that's hearing it and figure out whether they're being affirmed or not, whether they're being made to feel like they're valuable or whether not. And particularly if they feel like they're getting near a very charged word called canceled. If they have any sense that you're rubbing them off as a barnacle in the ship of the state at this next sandbar, we don't need you anymore. If that's what you're communicating to them, then you're failing in your science communication. So you have to sort of figure out who they are and then indicate some way that you like them at some level. Now, of course, it's really helpful if you are like them. If you're a Rotarian and you're speaking to the Rotary Club, play up the Rotarian connection, right? But if you're not like them, you can at least express some kind of like for them. It's just what you learned in kindergarten. And then they can learn from you. So it's all these things are sort of basic human connections is what we're looking for in the communication of this science.
Thank you. And so thank you to the audience for your questions. We're now going to move on to 1-minute closing remarks from each of our distinguished guests, and I'll say a few words after that. Monica, we'll start with you.
Gosh, well, I'll make it very quick and just say thank you. And we'd love to be at the WCS. We'd love to be a partner to you. I love coming on to the Weather Channel to talk about climate change, to help you translate it into terms that people will understand. Think of the zoo and aquarium world as a potential partner for you to help communicate this. And just remember that young people everywhere are counting on us to tackle this challenge because it is an intergenerational one. And what gets me going every day and what motivates me to keep doing this work, even in the face of this disinformation or the challenges with geopolitics globally or whatever, is knowing that my kids and my grandkids' world depends on us being able to meet this moment and do the very best we can to take on climate and to try to lower our fossil fuel emissions and change the way we do things so that we can have a more sustainable, healthy planet for future generations. And I just want to thank you all for what you do every day.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And I said earlier in the talk that I gave that we really need your help in reaching these indispensable partners in the indispensable nation. You've got the science. We want to educate about that science and particularly educate towards some policy solutions. And so there are ways that you can help. If you're on air, as I mentioned earlier, take the risk of putting it in context, as Kerry said earlier, of what we're experiencing. If you're in one of those state agencies, try to get next to those policymakers that are going to be making those decisions. And then, at the least, find somebody to reach out to that is that Charlie in your life and see if you can show them a lot of that kindergarten respect that causes them to be willing to hear you. And be open to ways you can call us up and invite us somewhere to make a talk or to give a presentation to that right of center audience. We're really looking for those opportunities, so you can help us very specifically by going to republican.org and telling us, hey, we got an opportunity for you. There's this Rotary Club. There's this group of people. I happen to know the GOP chairman in some county. Really, we want it to be at that granular level. And so get in touch with us because we could really use the help in making those connections.
Thank you, Bob. So the room here, and indeed the American Meteorological Society as a whole, has weather scientists and climate scientists. And speaking about the weather profession, it is, I think, by any measure, been a huge success in the United States, from the invention of NWP to the free availability of data. And also, very importantly, it's been a success in how we have gone about and improved the communication of weather information. So it's really a great source of pride to me to be part of an organization that has so advanced this. Climate science has also been very successful internally in grappling with the very challenging scientific problem of climate change. But I would argue we have not been yet as successful as our cousins in weather in communicating this to the public, probably because it's a much more difficult job. As we mentioned at the opening, it takes place in a politically polarized context, and we don't have the benefit of being able to verify our forecasts over a few days. So I think what I've learned here, and I hope you might take away from this, is some very, very good ideas for trying to close this gap and for better communicating the research that we do to society in ways that can really help it. Thank you very much. I don't know if we stay or leave, but let's go.
Wow, that was fascinating. I think a great way to start the week. A lot of both challenges, it brought it certainly to the surface a lot of challenges we face, but also a lot of optimism and a lot of urgency. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate it very much. We do have these scarves, and I hope you bought yours. I was beginning to regret I didn't have a red one and a blue one, but I actually think the mix of colors is good because we need to work together, red and blue alike. So this is 150 years of departure of temperature from the global mean. From, you can guess which end is 1800s, which end is where we are today. So I'd like to present each of you with these. And I think we're going to Okay, thank you. That's the end of the forum, but don't leave yet. We're going to immediately transition, well, not immediately, like 5 minutes to the business meeting. It's an important meeting. It's where you get to hear reports from our different commissions. You'll get to look at the membership activities over this past year. So hang around for a little bit longer and we'll get the program going as quickly as we can. Thank you again.
Welcome, everyone. Please take your seats. The annual meeting welcome and annual review will begin shortly. Welcome, everyone. Please take your seats. The annual meeting welcome and annual review will begin shortly.
We're going to start the business meeting in a minute or two. Please take your seats. Don't head towards the doors. Awesome. That was really fun. I think a great way to start the week. I didn't get a chance to. The Slido, I think that's really fun. And I thought the questions that you were all identifying and bubbling up to the top were great. And we have those, and maybe we can do something with it. It was just really fun. So what I'd like to do at this point is move into the business meeting. And I will call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Eastern Time. And I have to follow the script here. So we're going to transition to the annual review and the formal AMS business meeting. We have confirmed that we have a quorum of more than 50 voting members, so we may continue. Just a few more thoughts on the theme of the meeting, living in a changing environment. It really is a time to break down these barriers and work together. And challenging us, in a lot of these things we heard earlier and on the panel, we're not only going to become climate scientists. You know, we're still going to have our discipline, our area that we work in, and across the board. But I think that what we were trying, the overall planning committee was really trying to do is, it's not news, but it's just really drawing attention, refocus on that we are in this together, and challenge scientists to be better communicators. And get out there, and it's not easy. You could see that right now. How do you communicate this stuff in a way that's consumable and gets action, the right action? It's very difficult. But scientists need to step out of our comfort zone a little bit. But the other thing is came up a couple times, just in our day-to-day lives. You know, keep doing what you're doing and what you love to do, and if it's in something absolutely opposite of what climate change is all about, just, you know, in the conversations. I saw when I went to the broadcast conference this last year, they had presented a survey about where people, where they get trust from people. And it was very regionally dependent, and I'm sure we would all expect that. But when you get into some of the more conservative places, the people they trusted were their families and their friends. TV meteorologists were down, you know, second or third. They were pretty high up, but people believe their families and their friends, and they go out and they have coffee at their coffee shop. And that means that we need to talk to our families and friends. And when you're sitting on a plane, have a conversation. Every little bit helps. We have a lot of work to do. But I'm excited about the meeting. It's going to be, I think, a great week. I can't thank the people enough who worked with me. I already mentioned we have over 7,000 registered attendees, representatives from over 60 countries. We're going to have 2,800 oral presentations, 1,400 posters. This year we have over 90 exhibitors in our exhibit hall. Go down and visit them. It's such an important part of a community. Go visit the exhibits, talk to the exhibitors, thank them for coming and sharing what they're working on, a critical part of our community. We're up this year, so thank you in here who are part of the exhibit program. It's really important to the meeting. Thank you for being here. And 43 sponsors. Again, thank you. Meetings aren't cheap, and if without sponsors, it would be really, really difficult. You wouldn't believe the prices for these things. You know, like this little mouse pad, probably $500. I don't know. So the meetings, you do a great job, but thank you to the sponsors. It's really, really important. And yesterday, I had the pleasure to meet with the student conference attendees. And we're going to have over 1,300 here through this week. They're our future. Yeah. And what was exciting, and I want to share for sure, is that the theme they chose was, it's our turn. You know, they're ready, and they're going to be pulling us along. So it was just fun, and they're here all week. For those who are part of the student contingent, you know, meet all these people and share, and take some of these questions that were bubbling up in Slido and have a cup of coffee. Yeah, let's make the world smaller and work together. So now, thank you to everyone who has contributed to the making of this meeting. A special thanks goes to all those who have made the meeting possible, especially in light of the challenges we have faced leading up to this meeting in an uncertain world. It is not possible to thank all of the hundreds of people who have been involved in planning this meeting, but let me mention a few key groups. Again, our generous sponsors for the annual meeting, as well as our corporate patron, Lockheed Martin. All those who work diligently to plan an outstanding annual meeting, the AMS staff, I don't know how many times I can thank them, and it won't be enough. Jen Ives, Director of Meetings, thank you. The overall planning committee, I think they're listed, co-chairs, Kristen Avert, Kerry Emanuel, Julie Poland. It was great working with them. Lots of good meetings, lots of ideas, and lots of hard work. The local planning committee, led by Claudia Gorski, I don't know if I see her here, but Claudia. Special thanks to Pamatha Weir-Singay and Bernadette Woods-Plackey for all the work on that. I will add, again, those scarves that you can buy. We only have about 500 to buy on staff. Hopefully you bought yours before you got here. But every scarf you buy the LOC arranged with Blue Water Baltimore, which is an environmental concern. So we will be taking the proceeds of the scarf sales and donating them to Blue Water Baltimore. So thank you for buying the scarves, and they really are kind of the fashion symbol of Baltimore this week, I hope. And I already mentioned conference and symposia program chairs and the program committees. We couldn't have done this meeting without them stepping up to the plate. I'm sure many of you have planned a specialty conference that in and of itself is a lot of work, and you're having to deal with all these abstract submissions and how do you do with it. And they were willing to take time out of their busy schedules and also sacrifice some things from their program in order to make this annual meeting become what we wanted it to be, which was really a call out on climate science and services, climate change. And so everyone had to work together on it, and yeah, we couldn't have done it. And we have, if you'll notice when you call up on the program, you'll call up presidential, under symposia conferences, there's a presidential conference. You'll see a lot of co-shared, co-hosted, whatever, joint, that's a word, joint sessions between the presidential conference and these specialty conferences. So it was great working with everyone, and we couldn't have done it without the specialty program committees. And then there we have 85 students who provided support for the meeting here. So thank you to those. Okay, moving on to election results. Election tally is complete, and I have the honor of introducing your newly elected officers and counselors and newly appointed commissioners. President-elect David Stensrud. Is Dave here? Oh, there you are. I was going to say, didn't he get the memo? No. Counselors, we have Cindy Etherton, Gina Esco, Andrew Humphrey, Bill Quo, and Cliff Mass. Are they here? Thank you, and congratulations. New commissioners, we have Justin Pullen for Professional Affairs, Jen Henderson for the Planning Commission, Jen Sprague, incoming Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise, and Clevin Closel, Education and Engagement. We look forward to what you will bring to the Society's governments. Let's give them a round of applause. And now I'd like to acknowledge the following individuals who are completing their terms and thank them for their dedicated service to the Society. First, past President Mike Farrar. Right there. Thank you, Mike. Counselors Joan Alexander, Shui Chen, Mark DeMaria, Mike Henry, and Andrea Lopez Lang. And commissioners who will be leaving: Mike Augustiniak, Gusty, Sue Ellen Haupt, Susan Jasko, and Liz Cohen. Thank you for your time and dedication. So now, more soberly, we're going to move on to our deceased members from this last year. Each time at our annual meeting, we take a moment to recognize those who we lost. A thing that we met with, we're working on a strategic plan with the Harvard group, CAP, and the thing that they brought out, they've interviewed a lot of people, and they said the one thing that stood out with them so far as we embark on this is everyone talked about AMS as a family, that we're a family, that it's more than a professional society. And that comes to mind when you look back and see who we've lost this year. I'd like to make special mention of two individuals who were so special and served the Society, the American Meteorological Society, for so many years. Dr. Ira Gear, this last year, and then Dr. Richard Hallgren. And then the others from the community, do we have that list up there? Did it? I don't know. Nope. We should have had a list. Nope. There's Ira. Yep. then we should have Richard, and then the deceased members. Okay. So let's just take a moment and reflect on their loss. Thank you. As most of you know, the activities of the Society are carried out through volunteer service organized through 6 different commissions. I'm now going to invite the following commissioners up. Each will provide an overview of their commission's activities. And as they come up to the stage, our society, roughly 12,000 or so members, we have 1,100 volunteers working in these committees. About 1 in 10 members serve the society in some capacity. And much of that is done by the commissioners and organize these incredibly large and complicated and hardworking commissions. So if Mike Augustiniak could come up, Tony Broccoli, Christy Franz, Liz Cohen, Sue Ellen Haupt, and Kim Klokow McLean. And then, yeah, just come up here and stand and rotate through. Should we just start? Go ahead, thank you. Okay.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Mike Augustiniak. I'm the outgoing commissioner on professional affairs. And for those of you who don't know, professional affairs really focuses on supporting members and their learning throughout their lives, from students to retirees. And over the past year, in 2023, we actually had 2 big new initiatives come up. The first is a new board called the Board on Student Affairs. It's actually a cross-commission effort between CPROF, as we abbreviate it, and the Education and Engagement Committee. And it brings the long-standing Student Conference Planning Committee in with 3 other standing committees. One that is kind of focused on personal and professional development for students, one that's focused on specialty meetings, as the Student Conference Planning Committee focuses really on the annual meeting, and then one on outreach and engagement. There's also a new career counseling portal which complements really well our existing Board for Private Sector Meteorologists mentorship program. And both are free and open to all members. And the private sector mentorship program is really designed to be a year-long touch point and relationship. The career counseling portal is focused more on kind of one-off tasks like polishing up a resume or working on a specific topic. Information on those is on the website. We also, over the course of 2023, amongst the CPROF boards and commissions, had about 24 webinars that were free for members, 10 from the Board on Continuing Professional Development, and 9 webinars from the Board of Operational Government Meteorologists. We issued 43 new certifications, 30 new certified broadcast meteorologists, and 11 new certified consulting meteorologists. And another new effort this year is the Certified Digital Meteorology Program, which is focused on those who talk in a social media space, a blog space, a digital newspaper, a daily, and we issued our first 2 certified digital meteorologist certifications ever in December of 2023. There are dozens more, though, who have already applied, and you can learn more again on the website. The Early Career Leadership Academy, which is another cross-commission effort between Commission on Professional Affairs and Engagement in Education, had 21 graduates last year from a year-long kind of boot camp, including an on-site couple-of-day conference that was coincident with the broadcast conference in Phoenix. That makes now 100 alumni of this program that are the future leaders of the AMS. The CBM and CDM exam, that is the written test that those 2 certifications that you have to pass before you can get them. That is now available to take fully in Spanish or, of course, fully in English. And there's the ability to toggle between the 2 if you do opt for the Spanish language exam, because there are some differences in Spanish-speaking Latin America and Castilian Spanish, particularly when it comes to science terms. We also, in an effort to be more inclusive, have just launched a pilot program where the 50 most popular glossary of meteorology terms are now available online in Spanish as well, and there's actually going to be a talk on Tuesday at the AMS annual booth about that effort and progress moving forward. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Just tell you a little bit about what's been going on with the AMS Publications Commission that oversees the scientific journals published by the Society. Preliminary data for 2023 indicates we had about 2,800 submissions to our journals. That's down about 7% from the previous year. This downturn is something that other publishers like AMS have also seen. There's an increase in the number of competing journals that's dividing up authors' efforts a little bit more. There are also gold open access requirements from some of the European funding agencies. To make our journals more attractive, we have, for instance, and I'm just going to give you a few highlights here, we've developed read and publish agreements with universities in the United Kingdom to help us with our European authors, or at least some of them. We have introduced a much more active campaign over social media and contact with journalists to publicize AMS publications. And one example of that is a WeChat account with weekly posts highlighting articles published in AMS journals by researchers from China. We've introduced a new article type called Perspectives in 2 of our journals, Earth Interactions, and in our newest journal, Artificial Intelligence for the Earth Systems. And by the way, that Artificial Intelligence for the Earth Systems journal in its 2nd year has about 100 submissions, so it's well established now as a venue for AMS authors. Speaking of artificial intelligence, the Publications Commission developed disclosure guidelines for the use of AI in AMS journals, and they were approved this morning by Council. I'd like to thank some people, most notably some of our retiring chief editors, Ant Smith at the Journal of the Atmospheric Sciences, Ming-Fang Ting at the Journal of Climate, and Wade Crow at the Journal of Hydrometeorology. Many thanks to them for their service. Succeeding them are Zhou Wang from the University of Illinois, Isla Simpson from NCAR, and Viviani Maggioni from George Mason. So many thanks to them taking on these important responsibilities. And finally, I want to thank all the dedicated people involved in AMS publications, including the professional staff, the volunteer reviewers, the editors, chief editors, and the at-large members of the Commission. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Christy Franz. I am the current Commissioner of STAC. STAC is the Scientific and Technological Activities Commission. Consists of 30 committees and 6 interdisciplinary boards. And these boards and committees have primary roles in planning conferences and symposia, maintaining their membership, contributing to statements, and the AMS glossary, among many other things. The boards and committee members work very hard throughout the year to carry out STAC activities, and I'll just mention a few here tonight. So over the past year, membership among the boards and committees has grown by 15%, and at last count, we had 478 volunteer members in STAC. There were 34 STAC-led conferences and symposia at the 2023 annual meeting, and 7 specialty meetings at various locations throughout 2023. STAC members reviewed 17 suggestions for the AMS glossary. And STAC boards and committees are also responsible for selecting recipients of the STAC Awards, which are given for early career accomplishments, distinguished accomplishments in research, and for outstanding service. In 2023, the boards and committees gave out 11 awards, and this year they're giving out 19 for 2024. So that's a very significant increase in their effort. Finally, the Boundary Layers and Turbulence Committee, in coordination with the committees on air-sea interaction and polar meteorology and oceanography, successfully proposed the creation of a new AMS level award for outstanding contributions to boundary layer meteorology. And nominations for this new award will begin to be solicited starting this spring in 2024. So really, I need to thank all of those 478 members of STAC. I don't have time to name them all, obviously. But I will give a special shout out to the chairs and vice chairs who lead these groups and thank them for all their hard work throughout the year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Cohen, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm honored to be representing the Commission of Education and Engagement today. I want to first thank our past commissioner, Kevin Gobert, as well as our incoming commissioner, Kevin Klasel, as well as the AMS staff for all their work. I am inviting you today to be more engaged with our society. So Brad said before that the students were thinking that it's our turn. Well, it's also your turn. Everyone in here, it's your turn too. So how do you become more involved? Well, I want you to find someone else who is involved. The row of people that are sitting over here are some folks. And I'm also about to name the boards and commissions that are part of education and engagement. I realized I had 2 minutes, and just reading the list was 2 minutes. So I'm going to have those folks stand up when I call the board or commission that they are involved in. So maybe you could go and say hello to them after this. Maybe this is your first meeting. We would love for you to be engaged. So here we go. Board of Community Service, the Board on Higher Education, the Board on Membership. They need extra people, so find them especially. The Board on Outreach and Informal Education, the Board on Pre-College Education, the Board on Representation, Accessibility, Inclusion, and Diversity. Woohoo! All right. We also have Cosmos, Accessibility, Coriolis, Chala. I always think it's Chala because I'm Jewish. It's like Chala. Okay, but it's Chala. AMS Women's Committee, the Committee on Environmental Stewardship, the History Committee, the Local Chapter Affairs Committee, the Committee of Judges for Undergraduate Awards, the Committee for the Conference on Education, and the Awards Committee. I know, Maura, that you're on one of those, so you should stand up. Sorry, she's my friend. You should get up if you so choose. So if any of you are involved, please stand up or raise your hand, and let's give these folks a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all your work this year.
I'm Sue Haupt, and I'm pleased to represent the Commission on Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise. Our goal is to foster communication across the public, private, and academic sectors. With 26 committees and boards, we touch many areas of actionable Earth system science. We do contribute a lot in terms of preparing for meetings like this. For instance, this week, watch for things like the 12th Symposium on the Weather, Water, Climate Enterprise, the 15th Conference on Weather, Climate, and New Energy Economy, the 2nd Symposium on Environmental Security, and the Baltimore Forum on Climate-Linked Economics. Plus lots of town halls and special sessions and presidential forums. Our committee and board members have been really active in preparing for meetings like this. But this isn't the only place we foster those conversations. We're in the midst of planning for an AMS Washington Forum in College Park in May that will talk about policy aspects, an automated vehicle summit in Ann Arbor in June to bring us together with the OEMs, a summer community meeting in DC, probably in July, to talk about the state of the enterprise and where we're going in the next 20 years. We've had 20 years since the Fair Weather Report that started this commission, and we're looking forward to being active going forward. We talked yesterday at our steering committee about some of the topics we want to treat in the future and looking at especially the ethics and policy around the AI, working together with the very successful STAC committee. So I invite everybody to look at our committees and volunteer to help. There's lots of exciting work going on, and we'd love to have you engage. Thank you.
Last one. Bless you all for still being here. So I will be very brief as I am representing the Planning Commission. We have a few things to talk about, hopefully even a little entertaining. For those who aren't aware, the Planning Commission is sort of our home and place of stewardship for long-term strategy and change management in the society. So some of the exciting things that we've gotten to do over the past year include updating the AMS Constitution and bylaws. This might seem like a maybe boring task, but I promise you, it was a very exciting endeavor with a lot of engaged people. But if you look at the Constitution as it stands, you'll notice there was an amendment made maybe a decade ago, and otherwise the language is essentially unchanged for 50 or 60 years. So there are some positions in which the Constitution doesn't even envision women taking part, and that is in the language. So we sought to update everything from that to organizational procedures and arrangements that have changed, and most importantly, there are a couple of items that the council has passed that require a constitutional revision. That's what kickstarted us into this to begin with. But the student representation on the council, for example, needs us to pass this constitutional revision. I'm highlighting all of this for you because the constitutional revision will require full membership approval to pass. So be on the lookout for a process to come. The language has been put forward to our legal counsel and will go through the AMS council to be approved and eventually on to you. So I hope that you will be supportive. Take a look at what we have there. We welcome your comments. And it's going to be a great thing to have a modern constitution. And finally, I'll just note that you can count on the Planning Commission and come to the Planning Commission if you want to or have ideas for driving bottom-up change in the American Meteorological Society. If you're not sure where to go, you have an idea for a new committee, commission, or hey, here's an award that should exist, or here's any other kind of just activity and you're not sure where to go, because we have a change management process, we can help take those ideas from the ground up, vet them, and bring them to the right AMS leadership. Thank you very much.
Somebody maybe join me in one more round of applause for our commissioners and for all the volunteers. Okay, presidential reflections. It says here brief. Oh, no, it doesn't, but wow. It's been quite the year, a truly humbling and honored position. When I got to talk with the students yesterday, I did a little bit, looking back, it was actually sort of my first AMS meeting was also an annual meeting. It was 47 years ago when I was an undergraduate senior at Montana State University, and I drove from Bozeman, Montana to Tucson, Arizona to get the Howard T. Orville Scholarship. And that was the beginning of my relationship with AMS. And they've been there every time and what they've done. And I mentioned earlier about family. It's, I love weather. Since I remember I don't remember a lot of gifts from my parents, but I do remember when I was in junior high, they gave me a meteorology textbook. So, I just loved weather, and that's what I did. And the idea that one could love something that much and be fascinated by something that much and have a job in it and get paid, but also to work with so many amazing people. From my undergraduate to my graduate work, I was always in awe of these people. I already mentioned earlier how I just consider so many giants in my field, and so many people have impacted me. And there are some of you sitting in this audience, and I won't point out, but you made so much of an influence on my life. And to have had this opportunity to serve as your president is pretty special. It's sort of a pinch me kind of moment, and thank you. It was pretty amazing. So the science is incredible. What we bring to society is absolutely incredible. And I look back in what I did in those 47 years, well, not necessarily what I did, but what we did, and the progress that we made in those 47 years. And then I get to talk to these students. What will they be talking about in 47 years? What will they have accomplished? It's just mind-boggling at the pace of change in science and what we're doing and the challenges that we're facing. So it's just been great. So it's the science, it's what we accomplish, what we deliver, and people. And I will bring close sort of one more person I want to thank, which is my husband, Peter Schaefer. He's there. I was glad Bob left right away. No. Peter and I met 43 years ago in school, and he's done more than I can say for my career and for me. And I certainly would never have gotten close to being up here without Peter's support. So thank you. Okay, so now I would like Anjali Bamzai to join me on the stage and assume the chair as incoming president of the AMS.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thanks, Brad. Those are big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best. I'll certainly do my best. And it's been wonderful to have you the past year, just being like an apprentice, just watching you and at the council meetings, etc. And so I want to thank you first. And I want to thank you on behalf of the society as well for everything that you've done this past year. I think that we are in a better place. We heard from the commissioners. We're in a really good place to affect positive change. The other thing I want to say is welcome to the 104th meeting. It's here, and it's going to be a great meeting, 7,000 people, and great sessions, professional networking. We're going to have fun. The weather's going to be great. No extreme weather events, nothing. So no climate change is going to descend upon us in a week, so just let's have fun. The other thing about next year's meeting, we're going to be meeting in New Orleans, and I wanted to mention the theme for my meeting, which will be under my watch this year. We'll be planning, just like Brad had his overall planning committee. I'm in the process of sort of meeting them for the first time this week. So the theme for my meeting is Towards a Thriving Planet, Charting the Course Across Scales. So by scales, I mean different time scales, as well as different spatial scales, local, regional, and global. So I hope that you see yourself in the meeting, you see a place for yourself, and we're going to have a good time next year as well. It'll be the 105th, but meanwhile, let's enjoy the 104th. So with that, business is over, I think, for the meeting, and I'd like to entertain someone lead the motion to adjourn the meeting. Anyone would like to second? Thank you, Danae.
The real motion.
The real motion, yes.
I move that the acts of the councilors and officers of the society during the year ended 31 December 2023, done in the proper conduct of the business of the society, be hereby adopted, approved, and confirmed.
Thank you. See, I still have to learn, yeah.
Second.
Anyone second?
Yeah,
Okay, second, yeah. So with this, the meeting is adjourned. Yeah.